A reading from the Gospel of Matthew. Jesus said, "You have heard that it was said, 'You shall not commit adultery.' But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one of your members than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one of your members than for your whole body to go into hell." Well, Jesus certainly knows how to make a point and tell a story to get our attention. He's continuing his teaching series, if you will, his series of teachings in the Sermon on the Mount. That's that swath of Matthew's Gospel that we know by that name. Jesus is laying out principles for people about how it is that they might lead an ethical life, a moral life, a life in keeping with God's desire for them. And so we have, of course, the Mosaic, or the laws of Moses, the Mosaic commandments, where God has given the people of Israel a set of guidelines to say, this is what a good life looks like, the 10 Commandments. And of course, Jesus is going back in his teaching now, many centuries later, and taking us through those commandments one by one, and not necessarily in that order, but eventually touching on them and saying, you have heard it said that, and he will refer to one of the commandments or teachings that has been accepted by the tradition in this day. And he says, and you'll hear me say often, the Mosaic law, or the 10 Commandments, sets a bar here. Jesus is often saying, even though he's the guy that we equate with love and sort of a softer message than the Old Testament sometimes, always when he's doing his teachings on these ethical commands, he always says, you've heard it said the bar is here, but I tell you the bar is here. You've heard it said you're not supposed to go outside of the bonds of marriage and other relational boundaries that have been set. You're not supposed to do that. But I'm telling you that to even imagine doing that, to kind of look on others in an acquisitive way and to reduce them to an object of your desire, your lust, that you've already violated the relational command that goes with God telling us, have fidelity in your relationships. Be faithful to the people in your life. Be faithful to God. Be faithful to your children, to your spouse, to your coworkers. God is telling us it matters that we maintain fidelity to the vows and the promises we make to one another, and that it's not enough simply to not get caught red-handed. If you're kind of out there in the world and having emotional affairs, or caught up in online activities that take you into a whole different space, you're not really honoring the spirit of those relationships into which you have entered. And so it seems obvious. Jesus, of course, always the master teacher, gets our attention by saying, if your eye causes you that kind of wandering of your mind, just rip your eye out and throw it away, because it's better to lose some portion of you but keep the whole, not to be led into losing yourself by parts anyway, by just sort of giving yourself away in trifling ways. And so Jesus, takes this example of adultery and spins it out for us. And he does it with other things too, with murder, to even be, you're not to murder. You've heard it said that you should not murder, but even to be angry with your brother or your sister is to violate that command. It's almost like you've already killed them. So Jesus is always telling us the bar isn't here, it's here. There's more for us to aspire to. And he lets us know that God's standards for us are high, and it's not to make us feel bad or feel like, oh gosh, it's unattainable, but it's to inspire us to continue to draw ever more closely to God. The last thing I want to say about this is that this can focus on actions and consequences, but another way that we might think about this teaching of Jesus, that if there's some portion of us that's causing us to act in a certain way, vis-a-vis one of the commandments, we need to take seriously cutting that out of our lives. This would probably also translate very easily into some of our concepts in our culture about what it means to have good care of ourselves, what it means not to be drawn into toxic relationships. If you're in a relationship that causes you to harm yourself, you need to maybe cut that off. It's better to be alone with your Cheerios in the morning than it is to be living in an arrangement that is slowly robbing you of the life that God very much wants you to live with joy and with peace. And if there are other parts of your life that are drawing you into behaviors that are diminishing of you in one way or another, consider, says Jesus, cutting that out, even if it feels like losing a limb or losing a body part of some sort. It's easy for us to see how a person who has gangrene on their toe, how they need to cut that off for the health of the whole body. Jesus is saying that same principle applies to us in all of the spiritual and intellectual and moral ways. So continue to listen to Jesus' words as we work our way through this 5th chapter of Matthew, through the Sermon on the Mount, and consider well what Jesus says about keeping the body whole, even if it means sacrificing something that we feel we couldn't do without. Perhaps it's worth considering that we might draw more nearly into God's presence and more deeply into the love of God. May God be with you and bless you this day, bless you and keep you this day and always. Amen.